it is the new business for you, right? Once you franchise, you're no longer, well, just in your case, no longer just the senior care business. You are in the franchising space. Your goal, your job is how do you make your franchisee successful so that husband and wife don't have to work the 3 jobs anymore, that this is their dream, and how do you accomplish that? One of the things I found also unique about your model, about your franchise, I should say, is that so you have 22 locations already, which is great. You're spread out a dozen states or so. I talk to new franchisors all the time that are so curious on, like, how do I get started? How do I sell my first 10? How did you find your first dozen franchises, especially knowing that you're scattered all over the country?
I laugh because this is the same struggle that every franchisor probably has, right?
Yes.
In the beginning, and especially but myself and our CEO, we're good-hearted people. We wanna help others. We want to help seniors. We want to help people get into business ownership. And then you're like, great, we'll just franchise. And you already got an awesome concept and got everything together, FDD, ready to go. And then so the first franchise was really a longtime friend of the CEO that watched her through the years, right? Mm-hmm. Watched her create this life that he could only dream of. And he was like, now you have an avenue for me to get into this? Yes. And so I think a lot of grassroots, franchisors kind of start out that way. Somebody you knew, whatever. But then after that first, we kind of looked at each other and said, well, how do we sell more of these? And no one was really giving us the answers. And so, of course, we were trying lead portals, right? Because we figured that those are the people that are hitting us up all the time. So we're spending all this money on lead portals, nothing, right? It'll take your entire day, your entire week, all hours in your day to deal with these leads, but nothing. And so we started just networking and we started meeting people. And for whatever reason, there's several mentors we've had along the way that liked us, I guess. I don't know why people were so nice to us. But
you're likable, Kurt, because you're likable. That's why.
Well, yeah. And we were like, at the time, we're like, we don't know what to do. How do you guys sell franchises? And so, people really gave us time and people sat down with us and, people guided us. And ultimately, we had really utilized a couple of key broker groups to really build to where we are. Certainly, we have some, organic, leads coming in, et cetera. But our focus to build to that 10 was really primarily with brokers. And we did some franchise conventions. People need to go into those cautiously because, you can't just spend a bunch of money and go to a franchise convention and expect that you're going to sell a couple of units. You may. But, being an emerging franchisor at a franchise convention, I found to be challenging. People coming up to your table asking you how many franchises you have, and you say 2, and that, that's not for everybody, right? But I think that if you can preach the differentiator in that, when you have less than 10 franchises, you're able to provide a lot more support to your franchisees in real time, anytime. Typically, the leadership team, the founders are a big part of the support mechanisms. And so you really need to preach that differentiator. And you're going to run into people eventually that get that. And that's what they're looking for. And they don't want to feel like they're a number in a system with hundreds of units. It's not for everybody, right? I mean, you really need to figure out as a franchisor what kind of people would migrate to our concept right now in our life cycle, the size we are, because that's going to change, right? I mean, we're going to be maybe attracting a different type of person when we have 50 or 75 or 100 units. And so I think franchisors have to critically look at that all the time and get out there and talk to folks. And if you go into franchise conventions thinking that the return on your investment is going to be selling units, you might be disappointed and give up going to them. Maybe you're more lucky with those than I, but I think that if you go into those with the mindset of I'm going to make some great connections and meet people and talk to people and, build out my because you have to build out vendors as a franchisor. I'm going to build out my vendor system. I'm going to meet people who are, maybe involved as brokers. I may meet people that are interested in this business or know people who are. Conventions are a great way to get known and to meet others. Yeah. So really it was utilizing broker groups, a couple of them that I really appreciate that have been really, really helpful. And, we had some folks early on, a couple brokers that were really nice. And again, I don't know why they were so nice to me that before I was even a part of broker groups, they were throwing me in front of of small broker meetings to present our concept when we had like 2 or 3 units. And so that was really helpful as well, because it got me really thinking about how to present something I knew a lot about, but how do I talk about this industry and this concept from the perspective of somebody who's looking to get into this as a business that can produce for themselves and their family.
Right. And Kurt, the reason why you hit the success early on with the broker groups is a couple things. Number one, they understood your concept, and that's key. They have to be able to really thoroughly understand it so that they can represent it. And the second thing is they have to believe in the CEO and the founder, or, the leaders, to making sure that, of course, the deal is going to get across the finish line, but they want to make sure they're placing the people with the right brand. And so I think you had the stars align that way. And the reason why I think this is so important to mention is because there's a lot of brand new franchisors out there that are thinking, how am I going to sell franchises? And they hear about this broker groups, and a lot of broker groups won't take them on because they're brand new. And that is true. But if you are an emerging franchisor that's listening to this and you're thinking, I want to use broker groups, make sure that your concept is something that the broker group can easily understand the concept, and you have to spend the time in educating them. And I'm sure you did that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know what? I mean, franchisors need to think about, a couple of differentiators though, too, going back to that. One is, you may understand as a franchisor, you're in this industry. How does my business differentiate in the local marketplace? Because that's why you created yours in a market with other people who do the same thing you do. But it's a different animal to differentiate yourself as a franchisor in an industry that may have a bunch of concept.
Right.
It's a different animal. And so that required a lot of strategy and thinking, et cetera. The stars aligned a little bit deeper than, you're right. The stars aligned for us in many ways, but a little bit deeper too, in that we were building out this managed model, and we deployed it. We were ready to deploy it. Yeah, you're probably guessing it, March of 2020.
Of course.
What else happened March of 2020? A lot of people were sitting around wondering, what's the purpose of my life?
Right.
And what am I doing? And what do I want to do? Right? I mean, we know that that's the case. A lot of people really doing some soul searching in those times and working from home, et cetera. And so we got a lot of attention pretty quickly. And, those couple of years around COVID were pretty good for us in regards to starting a managed model at a time when a lot of people were thinking, right, I want to change things up in my life.
Kurt, I've only been doing this podcast now for a few months, and I can't believe the number of founders or CEOs I've talked to that said that they started their franchise when? In 2020, and specifically around March. I'm not sure what was happening right around that time. We're like, I'm ready to franchise literally right as a pandemic is starting. Like, there was something going on in 2019 where people were they were hell-bent on franchising their concept. But in your case, obviously you guys had been franchising already. Here's the other thing I want to segue to, and that is your company's ability to do this grassroots, organically build with no outside investment. You and I have that in common in building the companies without, bootstrapping it. I'd love for you to talk more about that. And because I want to hear other founders and CEOs to hear how you guys did it and what philosophically why it was the right move for you guys.
Yeah. So first and foremost, that was made possible by our CEO having a robust, mature home office, right? So our home office in San Diego, it's a functioning home care organization to this day, was a robust business. And so, she was able, and we were able to get this rolling really on the backs of that business, right? Because that was a profitable business. Make sense?
Yes. So Kurt, because what people need to hear is it took the pressure off of you to franchise. You didn't have to just sell a franchise to keep the lights on.
Exactly.
So cash flow in your existing model is critical. All right. Sorry, I had to interrupt there, but go on, please.
But we realized really quickly that selling franchises isn't going to immediately be a path to making a franchise business that stands on its own 2 feet, right? I mean, you sell a franchise and then it's meaningless financially for you, I think, with a lot of franchisors, and we live on royalty. And the challenge with that is that home care, should I say this? Yeah. I mean, home care is a fairly slow roll. I will say that. it's a fairly slow roll. It's not like a brick and mortar restaurant concept, right? You open your doors and you may have a grand opening and get a bunch of business, but
Sure.
your path to an overall break even may be higher because you're a brick and mortar business. Your investment is huge. Whereas in home care, your path to an overall break even may be not as steep, but it's a slower roll to get. You don't open your office and people come rushing in, right? You have to really build this out, and it takes some time. So as a franchisor, what does that mean? It's super delayed gratification. You put a bunch of work into getting a location rolling and functional, right? But it's this huge delay until we're actually realizing meaningful royalties from that location. And so, yes, it started out really building on the backs of the home office. And then from there, we just slowly chipped away. Certainly over the years, we had a 5-year plan that has become a 10-year plan. That has become maybe a lot longer than that, right? We wanted to be in a certain place 5 years and a certain place 10 years. And we didn't really hit that at 5 years, right? But then we really pivoted and really developed a managed model and really started differentiating ourselves and really started, fine tuning who we were as a franchisor, which was very helpful. But we just chipped away and really slow growth, chipping away at selling, franchises, a reasonable number, didn't want to be a franchisor that sold too many where we couldn't keep up with it, right? And couldn't support the people that we have. And that happens sometimes to franchisors. We've always been a franchisor that tries to preemptively grow our team before we grow our franchisees, right? So knowing, okay, so here's where we think we're going to be at the end of the year. What do we need on our team to support that? And so we're constantly thinking about that. But yeah, that's really the case. It's really been built on the backs of the home office. I mean, I can say that, this amount of years in, at this point in time, the franchise system standing on its own 2 feet, which is so awesome for me to see, being there, since the beginning of this journey. It's really, really neat, to see it standing on its own 2 feet. And then we can have more creative conversations as a franchise leadership team in terms of, now are there some things that we want to do to support our franchise system that we weren't doing before? Now that we have a larger system, what are some different value adds that we can incorporate? But, you got to be careful, right? It's possible to grow a franchise system grassroots, but you got to be prepared for a slow roll, right? And you have to make sure that you're always able to support the franchisees that you have. Because I think that there's a risk, and I'm just going to say it, maybe it's the elephant in the room, because I felt this way as a franchisor sometimes. Because the franchisor, we get excited about our number of units. 10 units, wow, we cracked 10 units. I always ask, how do you sell 10 franchises? Then you get there and you go, well, how do we do 20?
Right.
Well, it's exciting to sell franchises as a franchisor, right? It's exciting
to open a new location.
Vision,
yeah.
Expand, right? I mean, we're building something that's legacy creating for ourselves and our franchisees. But at the same time, you have to make sure that you're not just selling, that you're really able to support these franchisees at a high level, right? And so you're constantly, playing this dance between selling and then, being able to afford to build out your team. If you're grassroots, you have a bunch of investor dollars, build out your team, preemptively sell, right? If not, you're playing this balance with building out our team. What can our system afford with the number of units we have now? What is our system?
That is one of the most critical decisions we have as a franchisor, is not getting in front of our skis, right? Expanding too fast where we can't support it. Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.